God just kept opening doors and bringing people, and he still is.
If you're doing it right, if there's communication, if there's humility, the answer to that question takes care of itself.
God's going to give you people. That's his greatest resource, and that's the mission. That's his greatest love is people.
The internet's full of people making maps of mountains they never climbed.
Preference, I think, is in a very unhealthy way connected to ego. Ministry's hard work. Life is hard work. Everything's hard work.
It's hard to give up leadership to someone else, especially after you've done it for 20 years.
Hello and welcome to another Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. My name is Eric, and as always, I'm the host for today's conversation. We're so glad that you joined us for this episode as we're going to look a little deeper into our 2025 Church of the Year, Marysville Grace, located in Marysville, Ohio, just outside of Columbus. We are super excited to have with us today Clancy Cruz and Jeremey, two of the pastors on staff. Now, my friends, there are some unique distinctions about your role and your history with the church. Could we start out with Clancy, maybe start with you. What's your history at Marysville Grace? Kind of what's your role been, and what seat on the bus are you on now?
We can reverse engineer that thing. I'm on the back seat. I love it. I can just chirp at Jeremey from the back.
Backseat driver.
Backseat driver. All right.
So got to do this differently. In 2002, my family and I moved here to Marysville. We were recruited by the Grace Church to move here and plant a church. And I sat with many church planters in our fellowship and others that I might have known, and just asked questions and took good notes and followed that advice and tried to stay within myself. And, there was a great need here. This is a home of Honda of America, and we're only 30 miles or so from downtown. So we have a lot of cool things about our area, a lot of land, a lot of growth, a lot of industry came here. So our community was growing, and the gospel started to do its work, and people were looking for a church that was standing on the word, that kind of thing. And God just kept opening doors and bringing people, and he still is literally opening doors at a local school. For my family, I have different access to people and to leadership roles in the community. God brought great people around us. And as Jeremey mentioned before, just incredible, devoted people now, 23 plus years, still at it, still working hard for the Lord, still maintaining unity. And it's been awesome. We've had our tough times like everyone and everything, but very special time in the life of our church right now.
That's so cool. Well, as you both know, and hopefully our listeners know, that Momentum seeks to partner with local churches. And so it has been a joy to partner with Marysville Grace for most of those years, and just helping come alongside to be a resource to encourage you guys to, honestly, we want to put wind in your sail however we can. I love that phrase just because I think it's such a good picture. And I'm on your website now, and just marysvillegrace.org says we're fully devoted to following God according to his word as we strive to build authentic and meaningful relationships and serve our community. As I look at your church, you guys are doing exactly that. And so a lot of times you see a church website and their values, their vision statement, their aspirational goals. But as we, as Momentum Ministry Partners, as we look at your church, so much of what you're saying you want to do is what's happening. And God's blessing, obviously, there's for sure that factor. But Clancy, as you've now raised up, I asked you before we started, how many of your staff that are currently paid staff members have come from within. You've hired them from within your church instead of outwardly.
Like 70% at this point. It's hard to answer that question one way because we've at times, because of our residency program, we've taken in some young people right out of college, 21, 22 years old, who had a church background, great family, good training, but to be up to their neck in full time, the residency is a full-time thing, part-time school, part-time OJT. And so there've been a few of those people who majority we haven't kept, but a few were like, we have a need and it matches and it just makes sense. Would you stay? And they have.
Yeah. Now explain Jeremy's role and kind of how Jeremey came in. He would be one of those. So walk us through the process of Jeremey. Maybe you even could speak into this somehow. How and when did you come on staff and what was your role?
You want me to answer that? I mean, I came on 2007, and I came on as the worship pastor. So this was really like orchestrated by the Lord. I got a call from Clancy through a mutual acquaintance, and I was not in ministry at the time, was not looking to move here, but God had other plans. And so I would tell you, Tara and I felt compelled, maybe even convicted would be the right word. And so we came on while the church was in the elementary school in the early days, before we even went to 2 services. Came on as the worship pastor. And I spent about 8 years doing that. And then I moved into an executive pastor position. So I would tell you that was kind of like, we didn't have one yet. So we were kind of making it up on the fly. So executive pastor is way too formal or refined for what that job was. Now that we kind of have that position, like I can tell you it's way different than what I was doing, but really just a lot of like more like leadership support and administrative support and those types of things. And then after some time passed, Clancy approached me about thinking about the lead pastor position. And that's probably probably like 8 years ago now.
It's been a while.
And we, about 5 years ago, began a transition that was 3 years long. And then that transition ended like 2 years ago. So I've been in that seat now for about 2 years.
Okay. And Clancy, you're still on staff. What's your role?
Yeah.
Backseat driver as well.
Well,
Look, I'm going to answer it. I think it was.
I love it.
Here's just my opinion. If you're doing it right, if there's communication, if there's humility, the answer to that question takes care of itself. There are things that Clancy can do in his spot that no one else can do. And there are things that Clancy could do in his spot that no one else could do. Either one of those could be incredibly supportive or incredibly detrimental to the church.
Yep. Yeah, that's well said, Jeremey. That's very well said. I think
that was confusing to me, but no, I set a goal, Eric. I set a goal that when this happened, when I saw it happening, I was thrilled and scared because I'm like, thank you, Lord, for bringing Jeremey and Tara here. Thank you, Lord, that the things that I saw in him were true. Good speaker, good leader, good thinker. He's going to lead differently, but he's going to lead the same things, the values. So I try to be a champion of what the church is trying to do. And, if I have preferences, be quiet, right? That's not, those days are done. Sometimes I speak up about things, but generally speaking, I stay out of things. And there was a situation, a leadership, Jeremey led something, and it happened over the past month and a half. I didn't know anything about it. It was pretty big, and I think it was done well, but I didn't know anything about it. So I try to stay out of those things. I do stay out of those things. The elders have been very good and wise in their approach to this. They took their time. They asked me what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, and we formalized it. I do have a job description. I do have responsibilities. I meet with Jeremey every week. I'm at church as often as I can be there. I still have gifts that I operate in that the Lord gave me that don't require the pastor's hat, but I just know how to do those things. Pastoral care, some counseling, not formalized and not appointment based. So I preach half a dozen times a year. It's been cool to be able to preach at Urbana Grace and Bellefontaine Grace. And I know what my lane is. You know, I know how I should preach in those spaces and how I shouldn't preach. So I still mentor some of the young guys, and Jeremey does a good job of saying, here's what I want you to do for the next few months. You know, and I'm like, okay, that sounds great. And so I think it's working. I think it's working pretty good.
I love it. I think it's working amazing. The irony for many of our listeners, other pastors who are looking at this as a model, there's some unspoken things that you guys are referring to, but honestly, the level of trust that you both have, the level of respect that you have for each other, the level of pulling in the same direction, your vision, your unity is in lockstep with each other. And so you can have those no look passes. You can have the hard conversations apart from each other and with each other. And so I love that. There's so many things about you both and your story in the church that are rare and those unicorn type things. So Jeremey, for one, you're a unicorn, my friend. The fact that you started out in worship and you weren't even in pastoral ministry at the time, I have the Lord don't send me to Ohio moment as well. So I understand that too. but the reality is, like, to move from being a creative arts worship person and all the gifts and skill set that takes to then move into an executive role where you're overseeing, you know, some of the things that you're talking about. And I understand, I hear you, that it wasn't exactly executive as some churches may have, but then to step into the lead pastor role where the senior pastor stays on. And Clancy, you're a unicorn too, because the fact that you have stayed on for that duration of time and it's gone well, and there's not division, there's not tension, there's not been an exodus. I'm sure there are one-offs on some of those things, but the reality is God has used you guys both in this church in incredible ways. So we're just grateful for that. We want to make an example of that. We want to celebrate both of you and what God's doing in and through your ministry. Thoughts on any of that?
I mean, I do.
Speak into that more.
Eric, yeah, I would tell you a couple things. One, we have worked together for 19 years, and we've said, I'm sorry, and I forgive you plenty of times.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that is a critical part of the process and a critical part of trust. And, you know, so there are certain things that, like, you're just never going to get to if you don't do that.
Yep.
And then the other thing that I would say is Clancy's heart has always been, what is the best for our church? What does God want for our church? And my heart has been the same thing. So there's moments where we have our human nature like everything else. And, you know, we're selfish or prideful or whatever it is, but it has gotten corrected by, keeping that first, keeping what God's desire for our church is and the best for our church. And from just, the relationship that says, yeah, I'm sorry. And would you forgive me? And I just think there's a lot of those transitions that don't have that relationship. And if you ask me what's essential in it, I would tell you that.
Yeah. What does that look like, Clancy, in the early years when you're maybe you have in the back of your head, like, hey, I'm probably not going to be this guy here forever. And I need to start investing in the next generation and raising up leaders. When you start seeing some of those characteristics or potential in a guy like Jeremey, how do you go about that? Help maybe other pastors who have somebody on staff or they're starting to think about that. What does that process look like internally and maybe then externally?
Well, in some ways, it's you kind of recognize it as, all right, God did this. God brought this guy. God brought Tara. God did this. And, when you start a new church in a town like Marysville or wherever, God's going to give you people, right? He's going to give you people. And that's his greatest resource. And that's the mission. That's his greatest love is people. And I had no right to do anything other than steward the process, to help people recognize, not that they were clueless, but together we're looking around at each other and going, okay, this is a nice couple, a great couple. And they were raised in really solid believing homes, really solid parents, did ministry together. And we're like, man, this is rare. And, the unicorn thing is whatever. But I just saw these guys as like rare and unique and like, don't screw this up, Clancy. Don't screw this up. And Jeremey had a very, not only promising, a growing career in finance. And Tara, that girl is incredibly capable. She's like the lowest drama pastor's wife ever to exist on the planet. And she has caused no trouble, period. So the maturity is like, don't screw this up. And as Jeremey would be asked to preach, I'd go, bam. I thought he would be a good speaker, good communicator. And when he would lead something, he would lead it well with integrity and with excellence. And all of us were like, okay. I was afraid someone's going to pluck him away because that happens, right? Or he wants to be ambitious and go do something. That's one of the things. He is the least ambitious guy I know, but the most driven in the places where he knows God wants him. And I'm seeing that combo. And so it's a matter of just stewarding the relationship, because the spiritual gifts, the convictions, those are all going to live out, right? Just being patient with the process. Jeremey earned a lot of trust with me when there was an opportunity or crisis or a big hurt or a big need in the church. He steps into that spot. He didn't run. I didn't have to go find him. He's there. And the church would see that. And I want to make clear that that's a big factor in this whole story, is the maturity, the faith, the prayers, the support of our church family over the years has been amazing. And everything from, going to 2 services or hiring more staff or starting the residency program or buying land, buying a building, paying for it, seeing the wisdom of planting churches, they get big kudos for trusting us. But that trust is, you touched on that, Eric, and that really is something that cannot be underestimated. We've made mistakes. We both made mistakes. Not giant disqualifying stupid mistake. We made mistakes and we're going, oh man, we made a mistake. Or I wish I could do that differently. Or, hey, I'm sorry, that was a lapse in judgment. And when the congregation sees that, I mean, we don't talk in these terms too much, but that's actually maturity. When you can admit a mistake, when you can not be afraid, deal with the fear of the situation, get over yourself, do what's right, do what's best for the congregation. It may not be an easy season, but it's going to be a season that you're going to get through.
I love the language you guys are using. Even to go back, Jeremy, you're talking about when you and Tara were praying about coming to Marysville and you had the opportunity. You said you felt called and maybe even convicted. And I think in our ministry roles, when we have a level of conviction, we know clearly that this is where God has orchestrated and opened doors of opportunities for us to be in those places. It helps tremendously to that end, Clancy, what you just said about the trust level. You know that he's there because the Lord called and made it clear for him to be there. And Jeremy, even with your conviction, like, no, we were convicted that this is what the Lord was asking us to do, and this is so clear. So when you have that level of conviction and calling and clarity and all of it, then it makes it easy to stay and stick and see God work in and through you. So good job on all of that. I want to kind of just highlight some of those things because I think in a lot of times we get unsettled, and Momentum is actually going to do a upcoming episode on ministry can be hard and how do you take a hit and keep going, right? And so when instead of sometimes it's easy to run from those things. And so I see that in you both, and I see you guys working through things that might be challenging and difficult on such a high level, like you said, Clancy, with a level of spiritual maturity. That's a big deal. So, Jeremy, what does that process look like on your end? What was maybe the Lord doing in and through you as you kind of moved from being the worship pastor into the executive role, and then as you and Clancy started thinking about being the lead pastor? Like, what were some of the obstacles even that you had to overcome in that process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, Clancy said that I'm not ambitious, but I'm driven. And I think that is a fair assessment. So, really competitive and really driven at times, but I did not have an ideal that I was going towards. So for me, the worship pastor position came open and I was like, man, I don't know. Marysville, Ohio, like we went here, there was a Starbucks and I was like, oh, all right, well, there's a Starbucks, like that means something. But I was like, I think we'd like to go to Atlanta or Seattle or like somewhere cool, And God was saying Marysville. And then, like you said, we felt pretty strong conviction. And then we went through some really like difficult times when we got here. And so it was a testing of, whether we were going to listen. And when the executive pastor position came about, I would say the same thing. I was like, I'm not looking to move from this worship pastor position. I'm just continually trying to listen to what is God showing and telling me. And at that time, it was easy. It was like, well, this is what the church needs. You can do it in this season competently. And this is what you're being called to as a next step. And then we get to the lead pastor position. I just did not envision that. I didn't start out with ministry and saying, okay, it's going to be like a ladder and I'm going to start as the youth pastor and then I'm going to get here. And then this is my career pathway. My career pathway would have been, it would have been, the trajectory is far better in the private sector, right? So I wasn't thinking in those terms. I was thinking about being faithful to what God called us to in the season and responding to those things. And when the lead pastor position came about, one of the obstacles for me was, I don't know if that's like, if I'm cut out for that, or if I have the ability for that, or if I have the, the desire for that, because it just was not something that was on my radar. And then what happened was, like, that calling kept getting confirmed and affirmed, and by people that I really like trusted, I really knew well. And then it began to take shape to the point of almost like the first time, where it was like, no, this is the pathway that God is showing. And so that has been the story. I would tell you, and I would love being the worship pastor right now. Like, I really love that. Like, I miss that a lot. And yet this is the season that God's called us to.
I love it. Clancy, maybe you can speak into this, and then Jeremey, if you'll chime in. When you guys are facing these decisions, and as you're working together, as you've learned from each other, as you're leading the staff that God's brought, Clancy, you used this phrase earlier, when you have preferences on how to make a decision or how to go about doing a certain type of ministry versus a conviction. How do you know when one is a conviction or when it's a preference? And what do you do with that when it is a conviction? And you kind of gave us, when it's a preference, you get quiet, and every now and again maybe you share, but what does that look like if it's a conviction?
That's one of the things I really love about our fellowship and other groups like ours, is when the leadership is devoted to being guided by God's word and guided by God's spirit, faithful in prayer. Those convictions align among the flock, among the people, among the leaders, right? It's the Spirit does something that you could never claim that was something you came up with. It's like, keep the unity of spirit and the bond of peace, right? And so, as we faced challenges and crises and opportunities, really, it just seemed obvious what to do. What it required was faith and hard work and some resources, right? Be faithful to what the scriptures call the church to do. And then it took some courage and faith to step into it and give it time. So I think that's what gets a lot of churches and leaders in trouble, is and I have a real strong tendency to press. He mentioned competitive. I'm as competitive as the next guy, but man, you just have to let it come to you. See it's coming. Be patient for it to come. And so I think that's a really important thing to this whole question is God makes all things. Is it beautiful? Is that right? Is that what Ecclesiastes says? God makes everything beautiful in its time. And so I think that's one of the things that has really served us well. As I said off camera, offline a little while ago, is, man, our congregation has worked hard at and stewarded this principle of intergenerational, genuine friendships. Because we've gone through real heartache together, real loss together, real opportunity to do special things, hire trainees, plant churches, pay off large portions of debt, and put ourselves in a position for when God is ready to move next. And that's the season we're in now.
Cool. Jeremey, anything to add on that, the conviction side?
I mean, I would tell you that when a conviction is not your preference, that may be a good indicator.
True. Go a little further on that. How do you know that?
Well, if you've been compelled to do something that you don't want to do, and you see that, like, that's God in it, you don't really have to inspect your motives in that moment, right? And in the opposite, if it is your preference and you feel like it's a conviction, you better inspect your motives there. You better like test that somehow. And, relational maturity allows for, and again, like honesty and humility allows for you to, in retrospect, say, oh man, that was a preference, not a conviction. And, forgive me for that, because that's not the way that I want to lead, because you're not going to get that always 100%.
Yeah.
Eric, I want to chime in on that just a bit more. Preference, I think, is in a very unhealthy way connected to ego. When someone is pressing for a preference, it's because it's going to make them look good, or it's going to prove them right, or it's going to prove them smart. They're going to get some kudos or get to, praise. And, these are some things at my age that, man, I wish I would have learned those things to detect those things when, you think, okay, well, this person, okay, well, maybe this preference isn't such a bad thing. Let's go with that. It normally does not work out. Something goes wrong. Something falls through. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's just an observation that I think has become more clear the more I get. It's like, and I'll tell those people that want their preference, I'm like, good luck, because it's going to take you and you alone to keep it afloat, because you demanded it. You fought for it. You got it. Good luck. Now you're alone in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I think the enemy wants desperately to mix that all up in us, and that our emotions lead, and then we, get fixated on preferences because, Clancy, what you just said, we want to make it about us rather than about Jesus. And that can be so many times where we mission drift and we go off course in our local church. So good job. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to kind of transition out of that conversation into something I think that would be a next step even beyond that. When you do those things well and you figure out what the conviction looks like and how to lead according to where God's leading you, according to those convictions and not preferences, you begin I think you begin to work yourself out of a job even. And that's, the whole conversation we're having. Like those things. Yeah. So what's on your mind?
Yeah. But also you work yourself into a great team culture when you will just be honest with your strengths and weaknesses and not give in to the ego boosting, trendy, whatever. One of the things we've said is we want to be comfortable in our own skin. We want to be true to what the Spirit has done here. And man, it's hard work. Ministry is hard work. Life is hard work. Everything's hard work, but it's easier when the Spirit is moving. It's easier when the Spirit is affirming that you're prioritizing the things of Jesus, that you're dealing with sin properly. So we were at a conference many years ago. This, I think, was a real cool part of the overall transition, and something very important that Jeremey needed to do. And I didn't know it at the time, but in hindsight, this is exactly what he needed. We were sitting together, I think, in a breakout session at a conference, and Jeremey was taking notes as he always does. Me, I'm fiddling on my phone and rolling, looking around the room. But he's tuned in. We came home from that, and he's like, PC, we need to do this. And I'm like, I agree. So he took pretty much the entire church through a process of crystallizing the things that we do well, and then putting very helpful terms around them. And the congregation was going, yeah, that's who we are. These 4 or 5 things are who we are. And when we brought those to the church and we preached on them, we taught on them, the church was very excited to go, these guys are letting us be who God has called us to be. They're not bringing the latest trendy, gimmicky, shiny thing and expecting us to conform to it. we can operate. It's like the whole Saul's armor, thing. And that was very, very helpful. And we're still leveraging the benefits of that. We're still being able to run without tripping over someone else's armor.
That's really cool. As I look at your staff, I see a lot of people who've worked themselves out of a job. They've raised up, they've equipped others to do what they do. They've invested in somebody else on the team, and now that person is on staff. Speak into that culture a little bit about what that looks like. And I honestly, I'm looking at like Pastor Rich with, groups and family and discipleship, and Tyler with students, and now Bryce is, and then, Tim Smith joined now as middle school. And even with your admin team, like the fact that Sue and Brandy are like investing in these relationships, it's honestly at the core of it, as I look at this, and this is a big reason why, you guys got the award that you did. It's multiplication, not addition.
Yeah, I'll touch on that real quick. I want to throw it quickly, Jeremy. So Yvonne Brown was hired. She was in the corporate world. She was doing great in the corporate world. She was brought on as an administrative assistant. And we thought maybe that's, long-term, she would be like office manager and oversee admin staff. But Ronnie, our women's director, who was a founding member of our church, she was mentoring Yvonne and mentored Yvonne into, now Yvonne is now the director of women's ministry, and Yvonne graduated from Grace Seminary. And so that's just culturally, I think from the beginning, when we brought interns in and we hired some younger people and we put some pressure on that clay on the wheel, we wouldn't let them just do whatever they wanted, right? They had preferences or they had ideas. And often that's brought tension with young people because they want to, peacock a little. And it's like, nope, sorry, we love you too much to put that false pride and false hope into you, because that's going to lead you to a bad place if all you want to do is peacock. And most of the time people respond. When they don't, right? So I think it's made it easier for those of us who have had positions of authority and leadership and status and We're like, no, we get the most joy out of growing people into those spaces. And man, it takes pressure off of us, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to work so hard. Building partners, right?
Yeah. Clancy, give an example. It could be hypothetical here, but give an example of what, for our audience as pastors are listening and they have a young leader and they're peacocking, to use your phrase. What might that look like when when they're trying to, like, hey, I got this wild hair idea and I want to implement it.
I want to just like chime in here.
Please.
Well, I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to give an example of what peacocking is, but I'll just say this. If you're going to have this culture, right, and Clancy set this culture, you're going to have to be okay with things being messy. There will be messes. Like, you're giving some real actual authority into spots and positions, or I should say opportunity at least, where you're not actually just controlling it behind the scenes and you have a puppet. You're actually giving someone those responsibilities, and they are going to mess it up or not do it like you do it. And if you can't be okay with that, you'll never have that culture.
Amen.
So the best of leaders in your congregation, the men and women in your church family, they're dealing with this in corporate America all the time, in schools, in coaching, and everything. They're doing the kind of things that you're doing, and they're going, he gets it. He gets it. Whether it's a head coach on the local football team, or whether it's a corporate leader or a business owner, they're doing it. And when they see you do it, man, they have your back, right? They'll support what you're doing. But when they see the opposite, they don't even want to go to your church anymore.
That's good. That's really helpful. Yeah. All right. So Jeremey, speak into this, like the culture of investing in other people around you, of multiplication, not addition, of working yourself out of a job. How have you seen that from your seat?
Yeah. So what I would tell you is like, we're trying it, right? We're just trying to do it. We're not experts at it. Like I heard this quote on just from the internet. The internet's full of people making maps of mountains they never climbed. Right. And what I would tell you is we're just climbing the mountain. Like we're not experts at this. Like we're learning up, don't go there. Or, instead of, I think, just feigning to be an expert or like trying to get everything perfect before you start. So in some ways, that's what I'm saying is like, you gotta be okay with just going, allowing there to be like a mess and figuring it out. And that has produced things. It's not like wisdom and like, it's just like, hey, we're just going to try it. And then when we mess up, maybe we'll not do that one again. That's how you make a map.
Yep. I love that. I love that phrase.
How you can tell when a young person is peacocking or anybody is,
or an old person.
Oh, stop. They don't have any.
They
don't have any more feathers.
They take off the most.
That's it. No, I've been there. We've all been there. I had people pull me up short as a young man. I had people call me out. We can call it peacock. We call it, what they call it in sports. Remember? There's a phrase.
Well, they call it flex.
Showboating. You're showboating.
Yeah.
You want to call a guy out and say, listen, here's why that's not going to go well for you. This is what the congregation, the best of the best in your congregation are seeing those things, and it's not impressing them.
Good.
And if people are teachable, you see it.
Well, and that's part of it, Eric, right? We're not like super inclined to dive into conflict, especially in the church. And so if you're putting someone out there, giving an opportunity, and then they're going to have a mess, then you also have to be willing to go dive into conflict and pursue it relationally, which is sometimes exhausting. It's just exhausting. And that is what relational maturity takes. So I would say like it's the willingness,
Yeah, I love it. I love what you guys are saying, because I think sometimes we as onlookers at churches in America, you can idolize these churches that you think God's blessing them and showing them their favor, and we're over here working our tails off and we're doing all these things, and we didn't add a second service this year. We don't have an internal staff that we promoted, and the enemy again wants us to be distracted with all those things for sure. And Momentum isn't here trying to say we could give the Church of the Year award to dozens and dozens of churches every year, but it's an opportunity to celebrate what we're seeing God do in and through a local church. And I love that, getting to highlight the hard work for 2 decades that have gone into this. And this past year, you guys are reaping the reward of a lot of that hard work, creating the culture of following the Holy Spirit, being convicted by him, and letting him do that work in your life. So guys, let's just wrap up with some of this. In the past year or two, as you're seeing the fruit of your hard work, tell some wins. What are some of the stories that you're seeing God do in your church, in your staff, in the congregation? What are just some things you want to highlight and brag on how God's been working, and some wins that you're seeing him?
I mean, I would tell you we've got some wins from a staff level, because it's hard to give up leadership to someone else, especially after you've done it for 20 years. We've seen it happen 4 times, and all of those staff members are still active members of our church, and they are coming under the leadership of the person that replaced them. So 4 in 1 year of, or one-ish years of 20 plus year employees that are not just hanging on till the end and are willingly giving that up. That's incredible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I want to give mention to Cheryl Byers, who served as our children's director for 20 years. She did great, and the time was right, and she stepped into another local ministry. She still goes to our church, but she immediately found a place for an outlet for her passions for children in the community. And, it's only taken like 4 people to replace her. But part of that is the growth that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
But Cheryl was incredible. What a teammate, what a prayer partner, passionate about children, passionate. And so it was easy to, on the one hand, to bring people into that because they saw a healthy ministry. They didn't want to take over something that was struggling or broken or dysfunctional. So I agree. Those are wins. Another win is, Jeremey said he's been in this role for a couple of years now, but just in the past 12, 18 months, he's had the challenge to put together a sermon series again and again and again. I remember early on when it started to really like, whoa, this is challenging to put together, year after year sermon series. And it's gone really well. He's able to do sermon series I probably could never have done. So I think a win is Jeremy's preaching. He's very good. And I enjoy hearing him. I get a lot out of hearing him preach. And our church is really getting used to his style, way different than mine, but getting used to it and growing from it. He moved service times a little bit, and it made sense. It made good room to accommodate new people. Our county is literally, by all accounts, one of the fastest growing counties in the country. And there's different reasons for that. It's growing toward Columbus. We're not very far. We're only 15 miles from the Outer Belt. We're 12 miles from Dublin. And there's a lot of land between us. And so that in the communities around us, Plain City and London and Urbana and Bellefontaine and Delaware, obviously, those are all growing areas, and we need space. We mentioned the win of the campaign. Lots of good wins. It just feels good to go to church. Sometimes it doesn't feel good to go to church. Right?
Yeah. Awesome. You guys, this is so encouraging. The crazy thing I just was realizing that as you're listing some of those other communities, not only have you developed leaders amongst your staff, but you guys have planted other churches that now have that same DNA. And so even with Bellefontaine and Urbana and now the Lake Camp, speak into that a little bit. Like, Clancy, what was that process like of just investing in people that are on your team and that are sitting around your congregation of like, hey, this is something that God's calling us to do. I think you might be a part of that. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's an overused thing, but it just makes sense. But it's in our DNA. The Powell Grace Church planted us, right? We had some legacy leaders who coached us, and the need was fairly obvious in a couple of counties over. And then God brought us gifted people that we were able to invest in educationally, where we were able to fund their seminary training while they worked with us. And they proved themselves to be capable, called leaders, young men and their wives. And they responded to opportunities. I think I was a little surprised when Daniel was like, what about me planting Bellefontaine? And I'm like, we'd love to have you. We know you. We'd love to have you on our team. And it was an easy yes for that. And he listened most of the time. Ish. He listened to a lot of advice, and Jordan too, and Colton too. These guys are listening, right? And they see, I've come to look at it this way, and then I'll throw it your way. Church planting, most of the time, it's a little bit like franchising. Like, this system works in these areas. Take this plan. Don't try to be cute. yeah, you're going to put your fingerprints on it. You're going to lead it. But man, this is what the Lord said to do. We have a little bit of a unique expression of that works here in the middle of America. And these guys they've honored us in a way by just working with this plan and seeing how it works. And then they're ready. You know, Jordan their church has gone to 2 services now. They're looking for help. They want to be a church that plants churches, because I think that's a really healthy thing for a church, to be on the hook, to be on the record. We want to train leaders and we want to plant a couple of other churches. Yeah. I think a church needs that kind of challenge. They need that kind of mountain. Well said.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Jeremy, any final thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, I think we would use the language that church planning is as much a product of being a healthy church as it is an ambition. And so, it's a bottom up type of approach. You're making disciples. Out of those disciples emerge leaders. God puts convictions in their hearts and they go. And, so there is a sense in which, like, I don't know that it's like, hey, we're going to go to X and plant the church, as much as it is, wow, there's people, there's leaders, God's moving in their hearts. And then we have the capacity and maybe the responsibility. So that's some of the same things that we've seen happen. And I would say it's a response, maybe not that we shouldn't be intentional, though we should be intentional, but God has done those things. God brought the leaders, God surfaced the places, and we're trying to be obedient to that.
Yeah. So good. Well, my friends, thank you for being a part of this conversation. I'm encouraged. I'm blessed just getting to hear a little bit more about how God's working and how he's used both of you and the gifts and abilities and experiences that he's brought you to and led you through. So thank you for sharing your story with us. To our listeners, we really do hope that this has been an encouragement to you. If there's some takeaways that you have from this, don't be afraid to start working on that. Implement those things. Pray, bring them before the Lord, and really ask him, how can we make use of these ideas and these resources to implement in your local church? And I know that I can say that Clancy and Jeremey, I'm sure they'd be willing to hop on a call, and if there's an area that you want to dive a little deeper into. So guys, how could they reach out? How can they get a hold of you? What's a good maybe website, email address they can do that?
Yeah, so I think both of our addresses are on marysvillegrace.org. And you can always contact the office if they're not on there, but I'm pretty sure both of ours are on there.
Awesome. Office at marysvillegrace.org, right? That's the email? Cool.
That's it. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. To our listeners, thanks so much for checking out another Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. If you found this episode helpful, would you subscribe, rate, and leave us a review? That helps more people discover this podcast. We'd also love for you to share this episode with someone in your network who could benefit from the conversation. Because we want to be your go-to and most trusted resource, we'd love to hear from you. If you have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us an email to info@buildmomentum.org. Or you can send us a DM on any of our social media platforms. And if you want to learn more about Momentum Youth Conference, Urban Centers, Grace College Akron, Momentum Marketplace, or Momentum Pro, head over to buildmomentum.org. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.